Hello and welcome to another episode of Model Railroading 101. I'm John, and as usual, I'm here in front of the camera, but I'm also behind the camera, trying to make things look good.
Hey man, have you seen my genie bottle anywhere?
I'm here to discuss something that seems to be a mystery to many people, and I've seen it asked about in Facebook groups all the time. Many modelers like to discuss and even argue about it. So what is this hot and highly contentious subject? It's NCE versus Digitrax. My goal in this program is not to tell you which system is better, and there are aspects of each one that I'm not going to talk about because my goal is to inspire you to seek out the information that is relevant to you and learn more about it on your own so that you can make your own decision about what's right for you. In case you don't know what DCC is, check out the MR101 episode about DC and DCC and then come back to this episode. So let's talk a little bit first about NCE. NCE is short for North Coast Engineering. The company was founded in 1993 as sort of an evolutionary offshoot of something else called System 1. NCE produces DCC decoders and DCC components such as starter sets, throttles, command stations, boosters, circuit protectors, and wireless receivers. NCE's distinctive hammerhead throttle is one of the favorite features for many users, as they find the throttle intuitive and ergonomically convenient. Digitrax, which was also founded in 1993, produces decoders as well as starter sets, throttles, command stations, boosters, utility panels, wireless receivers, and software. Both companies offer more than just what I have listed here, but these are the things they make that are really relevant to this program. It's also true that there are other players out there, such as Ring Engineering's RailPro system. Ring Engineering will be the first to tell you, though, that their system is not DCC, and there are very good reasons for this. Since I'm focused on the NCE versus Digitrax debate, let's stick to that. NCE and Digitrax are the two DCC systems that I have most commonly seen debated, probably because they're the biggest ones in terms of what you're likely to find when you go to a club or a private layout. Both of these systems can be made wireless, giving operators the ability to control trains without always having to be near a plug-in receptacle. For the purpose of producing this program, I consulted dozens of experienced modelers who have knowledge of the front and back ends of either or both systems, compiled a list of common responses, then asked for volunteers to talk about them on camera. Rich Murphy has been a modeler for many years, and he volunteered to talk on camera about his preferred system, NCE. Let's go to his home layout and learn more.
So when I first started back into model railroading about 9 years ago, I was really intrigued with DCC. When I was in my teens, there were some bits of railroad controlled modeling, railroading going on. Don Feynman had his own system. I remember his cover of, I think it was an RMC. And so when I heard that basically this is now a commercial offering, I really wanted to have a DCC system. I'd previously been to the Silicon Valley lines in one of their open houses, and knew several of the members who also work at where I do. I work for Apple. And so I called Dave Falkenberg, who's a member of SVL, and said, Dave, I want to do a DCC. What should I use? And Dave was cool about it. He says, well, we use NCE at the club. And he says, there's a fair number of people I can introduce you to that also use NCE. So I would suggest using that. I've been very pleased with using the system. I find it very easy to use, and I find the menu system on the throttles intuitive. So one of the things that a lot of people like about the hammerhead throttles that are actually used by NCE is that it gives you several different ways to control the speed of the engine itself. You can use the speed wheel right here to increase the speed. You'll notice that the throttle goes up, going forward by increments. You can also use an increment button, which is right here, to actually move the throttle up or down. And if you want to get going faster in in greater increments, there's an increment fast and a decrement fast. You change the direction by simply toggling the direction button. That's right here. There is a momentum changing button. I never use it. I don't use momentum on my layout. One of the things I've heard that's bad about the momentum button is that you can disable all momentum for the engines, and that may not be what your layout operator actually wants to have happen. They might want to be imposing momentum on you. So the other important thing to be able to get to when you're actually using any manufacturer's throttle is easy access to the accessory functions, such as the horn and whistle, the bell, or the headlight. These things are really easily gotten to on the NCE hammerhead throttle. They're really evident. The other thing is being able to select locomotive down here with this button. You hit select locomotive, punch in the digits of your locomotive number, and hit enter. If you have a locomotive address that's less than 4 digits, you just pad it on the left-hand side of the number with zeros. So for instance, if you had engine number 30, it would be 0030 for a long address of 30. And you can easily do that here. So with this throttle, the way you turn it on, if it's a radio throttle, you just hit the emergency stop button, the big red button down here. It seems a little bit odd at first when you're doing this, but you get used to it in a fairly quick amount of time. Now there's a lot of lore around the fact that if you hit emergency stop while the throttle's on, that you could shut down the entire layout. If you hit emergency stop, the train you're controlling stops. According to NCE, that's the default setting for a power cab system. On a pro cab system, according to NCE on their site, you initially turn the power off to the engines or throttle the engines off with your first hit of e-stop. You reset the speed to 0 with your second hit of e-stop, and on the third hit of e-stop, you actually shut down the layout. And in order to get things going again, you'll have to power cycle the command station. Once you have your throttle on, an important thing to know is how you turn your throttle off so that you don't burn down your batteries. The throttles themselves take 4 AA batteries. It would take quite a while, and the throttle itself will time out and turn itself off. But the way to do it when you really want to be sure that it's actually turned off, you hit the EXPN and 1 button, and you'll see the panel is just turned off. So additional DCC functions for your locomotive consist can be accessed with the buttons 1 through 0, which 1 through 10, and also there are F10, 11, and 12 down here accessible with the shift key. I generally don't worry about any functions greater than 10 myself. I use JMRI and Y throttle for most of my connections, and all the buttons are actually labeled under Y throttle. There are other uses for JMRI, and I'll be willing to bet you John's going to probably cover that in some upcoming video. So I've heard some people say that the throttle's too big, this NCE hammerhead's too big. I don't find it to be too big as far as being able to actually use one thumb to actually manipulate controls for running the engine. If I need to come down and access some of the function keys down here, I might need to have to two-hand it. Other than that, I like the shape of it. It has a tendency, your hand kind of makes a holster for it, where the hammerhead itself actually stops you from dropping it. The other thing is, I've found that NCE is really responsive to doing repairs and upgrades of your throttle. I've actually upgraded the firmware on my throttles. My power cab throttle, I've actually added the kit for turning it into a radio control throttle as well. So I'm really happy with NCE's support of the throttle system here. So here at home, and even at SVL, the club, we use radio control throttles for our NCE systems. Evidently, many years ago, like before I even got back into the hobby, the radio base station actually had some trouble, and for a while we ran 2 different base stations at SVL. We've ripped off the other base station and are running currently with a single base station in a room that's 27 feet by 72 feet. Here at home, I also run a single radio base station, an RB01 I believe it is, And my room here is 24 feet by 28 feet. The biggest thing with any kind of a radio system, whether it's the radio base station for this or your Wi-Fi access points, you do have to watch out for construction materials or metal that gets in the way. I have one slightly dead spot deep into one corner in my layout, but other than that, I've never really had any problems with things. Okay, so one of the important things on my layout, since we have some 2.5% grades, is the ability to run consists. I'm going to try applying some power to engine 9949, which is hooked up to the rest of the train, and you can hear it grinding its wheels against the track. Obviously, one engine is not going to get this thing moving at all. What we need to do is make a consist. We have to hook together 3 engines, have them run all under the same throttle. I find it's really easy with the NCE system to make this kind of a consist. We're going to have engines 5758, 9131, and 9949 grouped together into a consist that will control just using a throttle for address number 5758. In some other systems, you would use a consist address, which is usually a 3-digit number. With the NCE system, you use the engine number from whichever engine is the front in the direction you want to go. So going uphill here, 5758 will be the front engine, and that's the address I'll use. Going downhill, 9949 would be the front engine if we were reversing this train. Or of course, we can stay on 5758 and just use forward and reverse. So let's build a consist. There's some buttons at the bottom of the throttle that have to do with making a consist. There's setup, which is actually used to set up the consist. Then there is a clear for clearing the whole consist, and add to add an engine to the consist, or delete to delete an engine from the consist. This is useful if, for instance, we were going uphill here and found out that we still didn't have enough power and we needed a 4th engine. Or for that matter, one engine dies off or we want to cut it out from a consist at the top of the mountain. Anyway, let's set up a consist. We're going to hit setup. And you'll notice here that it says consist, enter advanced or 1 old. We're not going to do things the old way. We're going to use the NCE advanced consist. In order to do that, I'll hit the enter button. It says what it's going to set the consist address here to. You'll notice it's 125. This will have nothing to do with anything else I enter ever again. Usually when I see this, I just say, yeah, okay, and I hit enter. The lead loco. You'll see here that we want to have 5758 as our lead loco. So we enter that in the number pad. 5758. And hit enter. The direction for the loco is forward. We hit enter. Now it's asking for the rear loco. Not the second one, but actually the last one, which is 9949. And hit enter. The direction for this loco, if you look at your locos up there on the layout, that one's actually going backwards. So we're going to hit the direction button. It changed it to reverse. It's running in reverse direction, and hit enter. Then it asks if there is another engine, which of course for us is 9131. And hit enter. Direction of this loco is forward. It asks if I want to add any other locos. I don't have any other ones in this, so we're going to go ahead and just hit enter. And we're ready to run. I'm going to go over and I'm going to couple those engines together now, and we'll see how it goes. So when I first got into railroading and bought my first NCE system, I bought a power cab. And after a while, I felt that I'd outgrown that. My layout had gotten to taking up a large part of a room, and I needed to add boosters and that sort of stuff and wanted to have consistent power throughout the layout. So I went to an NCE Power Pro system. But I kept the power cab, and I found it really useful. I've put it into a toolbox. I have various outlets on this and a programming track. I find the power cab to be one of the more useful DCC programming utilities there is. In this particular case, I've bought the NCE USB connector for my computer, and I run Decoder Pro on the computer in order to program the engines. So right now I have this new locomotive, engine 7695, on my programming track. I've brought up Decoder Pro in programming track mode, and I'm going to go ahead. I've set up a lot of this, but let's go down to the sound side. And I'm going to turn sound back on using my throttle with F8. And we're going to honk a horn here. Actually, we're going to read this full sheet first. So reading a sheet is something you do in programming mode. You can't do this in ops or on your main layout because it actually requires the feedback part. The power cab seamlessly interchanges between programming track mode and ops mode. So you notice that it started playing the sounds on there again. We have air horn selected right now of a Nathan K5HL. There are options. This is on a Tsunami. We're going to try going, well, first of all, we're going to blow that horn. And we're going to use the throttle for that. Normally, on the programming track, you wouldn't be able to do that. You'd have to switch back over to the operations mode track. I'm going to change it to a Nathan K3HL, and I'm going to write the change on the sheet back out to the engine, which is done in programming mode. It's going to come back on, and I'm going to blow the horn again using the throttle as if it were on the operating track. And you can see the effect has already happened. This is really useful in order to be able to test to see what you actually want to have happen, whether you're adjusting sound levels or anything along those lines, or lighting effects. I found this really a great asset for having the power cab. The Power Pro doesn't handle the same way. It really does have to switch between those modes. So I hope this overview of why I selected NCE as my system has helped you out. I've shown you a bunch of things that I really like about the system and that work fairly well for me. I have had a few criticisms of it, but overall I really enjoy it. The biggest thing for me is that I have a bunch of friends in the area that actually, help me choose the system and work with it all the time, and it's what I've gotten used to. So big thing at the end of the day is that you have fun with the hobby. So whatever system works for you, go with it.
Okay, so let's go to the Santa Clara Southern Pacific Depot and to the South Bay Historical Railroad Society's layouts to talk with John Wiley and Nick LaRusso, and we'll find out more about the Digitrax systems that they've been using on the SBHRS layouts for years.
Hey there, it's John, your roving TSG reporter again. We're here today at the South Bay Historical Railroad Society, our model railroad club in Santa Clara. We're going to talk about Digitrax, which is the DCC system we use here at the club. We have it for both our N-scale and HO layouts. We've been using it since about 2000, 2001. We had a member that became a dealer for Digitrax and sounded like a good idea to the rest of the crew, so they signed up. We've been upgrading equipment since then. We have current boosters, throttles, radios installed, and as new stuff comes out, we tend to upgrade and try out the new technology. So we'll talk a little bit about the features, we'll talk about the throttles, how you can integrate it with JMRI, and some other elements of what we like about it and what are some of the challenges with it. So Digitrax is a standard DCC system like a number of other ones out there. It uses a command station to connect between the track and your throttles. You can have hardwired throttles, wireless throttles. You can also use an adapter to connect it to a laptop and use it with JMRI, which I know we'll talk about in another video. Your typical full-feature Digitrax throttle is a DT 400 series or 500 series throttles. As you can see, it's got two knobs at the top. Each knob can control a separate locomotive or a separate consist. It has your LCD screen with your basic information, buttons on top, control things like train direction, selecting a train, dispatching a train. Then you've got a full number keypad at the bottom, which lets you control the locomotive functions, enter locomotive numbers. You can also throw switches from the controller, turn the track power on and off. You can do an emergency stop and a variety of other things. So Digitrax is great in that the throttle you saw here allows you to control a large number of functions from the throttle. One of the challenges, however, is as you could see here, it has a lot of buttons on it. This can be a little intimidating to new users, and sometimes it's not intuitive even for people that have been using DCC for a while. Digitrax does make smaller throttles that have fewer buttons and a single knob on them. These throttles are great for new users and for operations. In fact, the operations sessions I did a week or two ago, we primarily just used the small throttles. Another great thing about Digitrax is it's out in the model railroading community quite a bit. I don't know if it was one of the first ones on the market. Actually, I think that was Lens, but there are a lot of clubs that use Digitrax, so it's easy to get a lot of experience with it. Personally, I use Digitrax at home, and that's largely because when I joined the club here and got back into model railroading, that's what I was around and what people were using. So I got a throttle, used it here, and eventually got a setup at home. You don't have to worry about throttles interfering with each other. On some systems, each throttle gets an ID, a number, and if you have another throttle that has that same number, it will cause conflicts. On a Digitrax system, each throttle is independent and they don't overlap. I'm not sure how they achieve that. Another nice thing about Digitrax is you can pass trains between throttles fairly simply. So if I'm controlling train 100 and I want to give it to my friend on his throttle, he can, what Digitrax calls, steal it from me, and it'll go from my throttle to his throttle, and he can then run that train. You don't have to go through any extra steps. You basically enter the train number on the other throttle. It'll ask if you want to steal it, yes, no. You say yes, and it's on your throttle. So that's a really easy thing to do on Digitrax. Consisting is fairly straightforward. The LCD screen doesn't have the extra characters to spell out words, so it doesn't ask you questions about direction and things of that nature. You have to pay attention to which way your engine is going, and we can demonstrate consisting in a little bit. But otherwise, it's not complicated. Once you've done it once or twice, it's easy to use. So the throttle is fairly lightweight, fits in your hand well. It's easy to adjust the knobs without having to look at it. You could double click a knob to change the direction of your train without having to feel the buttons. Otherwise, pretty easy to use. Unfortunately, there's no battery on-off switch on the Digitrax throttles. On the very newest throttle, the 500, I think you can turn the battery off. You can power down the throttle, but there's no way to do that on the older series, so you actually have to take the battery out to save the battery. A lot of users take the battery out, turn it around backwards, and put it back in. That's safe to do and saves your battery. Again, as I mentioned, there's a lot of buttons on this throttle, so if you're going to do much more than control the direction, control the speed, and maybe one or two functions, you do have to look at the throttle to know what you're doing, what button you're hitting. If you hold the function button and hit the 1, it goes into extended functions plus 10. So this means you can do 13, 14, etc. up to 20. You could then hit function 2 and it'll go into plus 20, so 21, 22, 23. While you're in this mode, the throttle has a little X1, X2, X3 in the center of the screen here, letting you know you're in the higher level functions. This way, when you hit 5, if it's X2, it's 25. If it's X1, it's 15. You have to pay more attention to use that, but you can get to all the functions on the controller, and as the standard grows and we grow into 30, 40 functions, I'm sure they'll be accessible. An alternative to this that a lot of people do like is that's why you'd want to use JMRI and Y throttle. Again, we'll get into this more in another video. But on the Y throttle, it's really easy to just go over and get into 26, 27, because there's already buttons for it and you just scroll back and forth. So moving on to the wireless capabilities of Digitrax, obviously people like to be able to walk around with their throttles and control their trains and not have to stand in one spot. Digitrax has had several generations of wireless technology. The first one was infrared, like your remote TV remote. Then they moved to one-way radio control. Those throttles have an R at the end of the model name on the throttle. Then they moved to two-way duplex control, and those throttles have a D on the end of the throttle name, much like this one does, which may or may not show up well in the video. We can cut that in. So on our layout, we have both a one-way and two-way radio on our Digitrax system, and they both interoperate just fine. What we've discovered is the two-way radios, the duplex radios, use the same frequency range as modern wireless access points and Bluetooth radios and cell phones, the 2.4 gigahertz spectrum. This can cause problems if you put your Digitrax radio receiver close to your wireless access point. They'll interfere with each other. So we've had to do some experimenting where we separate the devices so we both have good Wi-Fi and good Digitrax control. We've been able to work it out, but it is something to be aware of. One of the advantages of the Digitrax radios is you can have two layouts right next to each other, both using the same radio technology, and they won't interfere with each other. Our HO scale and N scale layouts both have the two-way radios, the duplex radios, but they don't interfere. When you set up your Digitrax system, you can configure an identification number or channel number on each radio so they use their own channels. So basically the N scale layout is on channel 3 and the HO layout is on channel 4. You can have two throttles right next to each other and they won't interfere with trains on either layout. Another comment to bring up about the controller is some people feel that these controllers are hard plastic. They're a little flimsy or maybe delicate if you drop them. We've dropped ours at the depot a handful of times and they still work okay. It's not something we're trying to test, but you know, if you drop it once or twice, it seems to hold up all right. We have had the battery doors. These little prongs on the battery door will break off. You could still use it without the prongs. It's a little annoying. Digitrax does sell a replacement part now, but that is one thing we'd like to see them change about the design is the battery door. However, it's a pretty minor inconvenience overall. The controller uses a 9-volt battery. Well, let's turn that right side up for you guys here. There you go. And what we've discovered is you can get these 9 volts on Amazon that will do 9.6 volts or even a little bit higher. And we found these type of batteries work very well in the controller. The controllers will run when the battery voltage drops below 9 volts, but you really start to have problems with the radio we discovered. And in fact, some of these batteries will actually get up to like 10 point something volts, and the controller runs just fine with that and actually seems to maybe work a little bit better. It's not something we've specifically tested, but just using them long term has shown you don't want to get below 9 volts, and getting these nice rechargeable 9 volts that go a little bit higher and hold their charge longer works a lot better than your typical Ever-Ready or Duracell 9-volt battery. When you first put the battery in the throttle, it will give you a voltage reading on the front when the throttle boots up. You want to pay attention to that because if it's below 9 volts, you should definitely change your battery. Now we'll head out to the N-scale layout and our friend Nick LaRusso will show you how to use the controller to do consisting and a few other things on the Digitrax system.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, my name's Nick. I'm another member of the SBHRS, and I'm going to show you basic consisting with the Digitrax 402D. First thing you're going to want to do is on the right throttle, hit loco and acquire your lead locomotive, which for mine is 6304. Then you hit enter. Then on your left throttle, scroll it over to make sure select is flashing. Hit loco. And then my B unit number is 8146. Enter. And I'll roll up to the other locomotive to make sure I'm going the right direction. And then what you do is you hit MU for consist and plus to add. Then on the right throttle, we came uncoupled, but they are consisted together. And to add an additional locomotive, we will add John's SD24. You push the left throttle and loco, and then it is 7240. Enter. And you want to make sure it's going in the right direction, so I'll change direction. And slowly back it up. And then I hit MU plus. and we have a full consist working together, and it's just that simple. Now I'm going to show you guys how to steal a locomotive. That's loco. Enter. And if you see how it says steal, all you do is hit yes, and you've correctly acquired locomotive from your friend's throttle.
That's our coverage of Digitrax. There's more to the system, obviously, but hopefully it gives you a good idea of what it does. Really, any DCC system you pick up or get told about is going to do all of the basic functions you need on your DCC-equipped locomotives. In fact, if you're computer inclined now, you can even build your own DCC system out of a Raspberry Pi and a few parts, and then just use tablets or iPhones or whatever other smart device you have to talk to it. In fact, ESU is coming out with a system now where the primary controller is an Android phone with a knob on the end, just about. It's pretty cool. Thanks for watching. That's our video on Digitrax. We hope you enjoyed, and we'll see you next time.
So what have we learned from all this? As with many choices this hobby presents you with, there are more than just a couple ways to get the results you want, and both of these systems, when set up properly, can provide you with the level of functionality that you need to enjoy yourself. While there are pros and cons to the throttles each one uses, once you get accustomed to one or the other, it's no longer an issue. While it might take a little longer to learn with the Digitrax, the trade-off is that it offers more flexibility and easier access to advanced functions for hardcore operators. Both systems also allow for the integration of Wi-Fi interfaces. That means you can use third-party apps on your smartphone or tablet to control your trains. I think it's safe to say, use what you're more comfortable with. If you really can't decide for yourself, get what your friends have, or whatever is used at the club if you belong to one. That way you'll have sort of a built-in support system if you ever need help. One of the responses I got from one of the modelers I emailed said just that. He said, getting most questions answered can happen over lunch. That sounds like a great way to get an answer if you ask me. I'll have the BLT and a side of answers, thank you very much. I've used both, and I like them both a lot. If pressed, I would admit that I prefer NCE's throttle, but the nerdy part of me is really interested in the advanced functionality of the Digitrax throttle, enough that I could probably get past the awkward design. Both also benefit from JMRI, which sounds to me like a great topic for a future episode of Model Railroading 101. What do you think? Have you tried both systems? Did I forget to mention anything? Put a comment in the comment section below and share your thoughts. If you find this content interesting, entertaining, or useful, please share it with your friends and subscribe to the channel for more. Thanks for watching and make it a great day.